Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards.
If you're listening to this podcast, then you're in great company. We've got thousands of listeners who have a thirst for continual improvement and raising standards in business. Whether your interest is in quality, sustainability, or risk standards, I'd love to welcome you as a member to our online platform for all things ISO, the ISology Hub. The ISology Hub is the leading place to get access to all of your online resources, from in-depth training courses through to our very popular coffee break training, to templates and action plans and many other resources to help raise standards. As a member, you get access to over 100 courses, taking you from learner to practitioner to leader. The ISology Hub has all the resources that you need, which will really help to make your life easier and to help improve compliance in those business critical areas. So if you'd like access to learning and compliance resources ranging from data privacy to environmental management, anti-bribery, business continuity, quality, health and safety, to name just but a few, the list is endless actually, then we'd love you to come and join us. Just head over to the isologyhub.com.
Hello everybody, welcome to the ISO show again. I'm Ian Battersby, Senior ISO Consultant with Blackmores UK Limited. We're going to do something a bit different today. It's Christmas. We're going to have a little Christmas special. Everybody does a Christmas special, so we thought we'd be like everybody else this year. What we're going to do, I've got with me my fabulous colleague, Steve Mason, today. Hi Steve, how are you?
Hi Ian, hi. I didn't bring the jingle bells with me, sorry.
Oh, that's a shame. I've got reindeer sitting here waiting for something to go at, so
Oh,
we'll have to
excellent. So
make
all
do with the
festive.
carrots. Yeah. So what Steve and I are going to do today is we're going to share some experiences we have. Hopefully you'll find them amusing. Hopefully we'll all learn some small lessons from them. We've sort of badged this something along the lines of it shouldn't happen to an auditor. Anybody who grew up in the 70s, we could have gone with Confessions of an Auditor maybe, but let's stick with it shouldn't happen to an auditor. And these are some of our experiences in the world of audit and working with standards and some sort of related topics where things haven't quite gone to plan. At the time, it can be absolutely excruciating, but on reflection, it's part of life's rich tapestry, which you can look back on with a bit of humour. So I think in the spirit of ISO standards, I think we should begin with leadership, shall we, Steve? Have you got any examples of where you think leadership may have been wanting at some time?
Yeah, I think there's been a few cases like that, and you often sort of see, you ask the question, and you can see on the face of the person that they think, oh, I wish you hadn't asked that question.
Yes.
So, certainly there was one, well, we talk about management review, that's always a bit of a pain for a lot of leaders in companies. And I looked at a particular management review for that year, and I noticed it had some actions from the previous management review. So I said, oh, can I see the previous management review? And I looked at that and I thought, I seem to have read this one somewhere else before. And I noticed it was exactly the same as the one I was reading for that year. And I said, oh, do you by any chance have the one before that? And then they showed me a third one, and each single management review was word for word exactly the same. So You can guarantee that I actually gave them a major non-conformity for that because they clearly weren't taking it seriously, and I think they thought they were pulling the wool over my eyes, you know. But
I think we've all come across the world in which cut and paste has become far too commonplace, but also it becomes quite obvious. I've worked in a number of organisations where I've seen documentation. In fact, I worked on tender documentations once for a construction company, and halfway through a very big tender document, I found the name of the client change to a previous client's name in the tender document. And if you submit the tender and it's got the wrong client name in, they will smell a rat, won't they? It's not a very good place to be.
absolutely,
But
yeah.
yeah,
And I saw that on a manual, quality manual once, where every single page had a completely different company's name on it. And what they'd done is they'd gone through the internet and just taken pages off the internet of things that looked good to them,
indeed, yeah.
but didn't bother changing the logo on each page. So not only was it for one company, it was for about 500 companies, you know. So
I always advise plagiarism as being a very good form of management. You know, other people have had good ideas that we can all steal from. I have worked with a lot of people, and this is a word of warning to clients as well as anybody else, that if you bring from one company your good idea and the good system documents that you believe will work in your new company, please make sure that you remove the previous company's name, details, roles and responsibilities in it before you start using it in a certification audit, because it's a difficult to place to be in that respect as well. Your falsification of records has me in mind of something. This is actually about leadership as well as subcontractor control, because it was one of the organisation's leaders who was the culprit in this. I was auditing a subcontractor of ours when I worked in construction. Big site, very complex site, but very clear rules on induction, health and safety induction, environment, quality, everything, and the need for people to be inducted correctly, a full day's induction for people to come onto site, no matter who they were, and then daily briefings, toolbox talks, and the like. I'd spent a few journeys to this site trying to get from a specific subcontractor records of these, awareness training,
yes,
induction,
yeah,
and the like.
yeah.
And I eventually managed to get a very nice shiny set of documents with very clean edges, which indicated the names of dozens and dozens and dozens of people over dozens of pages had attended various training and induction sessions. The problem was, though, that all of the signatures, they were different names, but all the signatures were in the same handwriting, which was a big clue. And it just happened to be the director in charge of that site for that company who was signing everybody off as being trained.
Oh, crikey,
It's just
crikey.
illegal at that level. It breaches all sorts.
Yeah, because if anything happens, you've had it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are some things that are done like that that I think sometimes directors think, "Oh, okay, it's going to be easier to do this way," and they've probably got a good reason for doing it in some cases, like the financial director that backed up the whole of their financial system onto a memory stick.
Indeed.
And I said, "Well, why have you done that?" He said, "Oh, I don't trust the IT system, backup system." So I said, but the IT backup system is far more stable than your memory stick. I said, what would happen if that memory stick you plugged it in tomorrow and it didn't work? What would happen? He said, well, I'd lose all my financial data. And he said, anyway, that's not going to happen. So I said, I can guarantee it will happen. And he started to go a bit white in the face, and of course, again, that gets non-conformities raised,
It does, yeah. And we've been in a position in a previous life where we had, I think, three major nonconformities out of research. And this is the power of a systems approach, but also where having a nice looking system doesn't necessarily work if there isn't that commitment to it. And the auditor said to us that you have a very nice management system, but I can't see the commitment of your management to using it, which was a bit of a blow after he's worked for 3 years with them to try and actually adopt. And I can see reasoning that people have for circumventing systems. I need to get it done. And that's the reason why people like us should work with management and leadership to find out the easiest and best way to facilitate them doing what they need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Have they over-engineered their management system and it's not actually working for them, but working against them? I mean, you say about commitment. The funniest one I came across is where a director had said to me early in the morning, "Oh, I haven't got time to see you today." So I said, "Well, okay, but it's been in the plan for 6 months, so surely you can spare a bit of time." So he said, "All right, I'll give you 5 minutes after lunch." I walked into the office 5 minutes after, or just after lunch, and the first thing he said to me, he said, I can tell you that I'm totally committed to BS 5750. So I
What
thought,
year?
oh, right. I said, well, that's good. I said, because 5750 actually ceased to exist 20 years ago. We're now on ISO 9001. He said, what's that? So I said, well, if you don't know what it is, I'll raise a major non-conformity on lack of senior management commitment. That certainly made a few things hit the fan that day. Because I just turned around and walked out. I said, "Thank you very much. I'll carry on the rest of my audit," and walked out. But apparently, it just really made things hit the fan. But that just shows you that just a throwaway comment like that, and he wasn't joking. He was dead serious. He actually didn't know what 9001 was.
That's a shocker, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and he was absolutely surprised. And I said, "No, that no longer exists as a standard."
Wow, wow. We bang on about leadership constantly, don't we? And I will repeat it over and over again. Without leadership commitment, any initiative will fail. People just simply go, if it's not important to you, why do you think it should be important to me?
Absolutely, and a leadership example is just as important. One of the things I always used to do and still do is a thing called skip diving. You follow the sort of document waste trail, find out where does it go to. Okay, ends up in the skip. Okay, let's go to the skip. Let's find out what's in the skip. And I remember this company. We went out to follow the whole process to the skip, and I looked into the skip and I thought, that most of that documentation looks quite confidential. And actually, I then spotted a few bits and pieces that had strictly confidential on them. So I said, "What? Why is that in there?" And then somebody said, "Oh, I think that's the content of the CEO's filing cabinet."
Oh dear.
So I said, "Okay." I said, "What? Why is it in the skip?" And they said, "Well, don't know. Let's go and find out." So we picked out what we could of the confidential waste and walked through to the CEO. I said, "I noticed there's a load of documents in the skip. I believe it might be coming from your filing cabinet." He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I threw it out last night." So I said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Well, I didn't want you to catch me with anything I shouldn't have."
Oh,
I said, "Okay, well, you've just earned yourself a major non-conformity because everything in that skip is strictly confidential or confidential." And I said, "It's open to the elements." So basically, I said, anybody can walk past this building, walk round to that skip and jump inside that skip and take anything to do with your business.
or it could blow over in the wind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did work in the NHS. One of our local hospitals had an accident in bad weather, and quite literally, the entire grounds were littered with medical records, which were supposed to have been disposed of in a better fashion.
Yes, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing that you might think, "Oh, I've raised a lot of major non-conformities there," but normally, if it happens at the senior level in an organisation, they should be major non-conformities.
They should, yeah.
Yeah, because that's where the commitment and the support comes from in the management system. And if it's not there, then the rest of it is a little bit lost, really. So,
Mm, yeah. And also, I've got an example here of where leadership do set an example. They ought to follow rules which they themselves have proposed, championed, advertised, or whatever it might be. I was working for a UK manufacturing company, which was part of a big international firm, a huge global presence. All shop floor activities in the UK are strictly governed by PPE requirements. Okay, proper shoes, glasses, high vis if you're a visitor, that sort of thing. And this is not just at UK. This is global safety initiatives, which are global directors. And there's a big matrix management system with directors at all sorts of levels and across each other. But one of the global directors turned up at one of the UK sites, and he was inducted onto site as everybody else by the management there. And he walked out into the shop floor on this site, past the signs, which told him what to wear, ignoring the induction he'd had telling him what to wear. And because of his position, I presume, assumed he could walk out onto the shop floor with no PPE whatsoever. Fortunately, the supervisor on the shop floor didn't let him get more than about 5 paces before he turned him round and sent him back to the PPE room to get the visitor PPE on. Which is good to see. That's leadership at that level,
Absolutely. I came across a very similar one where, like a global company, the top of the organisation had come across to this country to visit a data centre, and he went to the security gate of the data centre. The guy at the security gate said, "Sorry, I don't care who you are, you're not coming in." He said, "Why not?"
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, your name's not on the list." He said, "You haven't gone through the process of being approved for entry into this data centre, so I cannot and will not let you in," sort of thing. Of course, complaints went flying everywhere, but the head of the UK, I'll give him his due, head of the UK, turned around and said, "I'm very glad that my operative did not let you in, because he was following security protocol." And that's the lesson that you need to know, is that if you come to the UK, you will be turned away if you've not followed security protocol. And you do need these people, sometimes in positions lower down, that are not afraid to walk up to a director and say, "Sorry, you're breaking the rules." And directors shouldn't be annoyed at that. They should be grateful they've got those people in their companies, you know.
Yeah. And if it's a genuine mistake, that's fine. If it's an arrogance, that's a problem,
Yes,
because your whole
absolutely.
system begins to fall apart at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one of the funniest things I did, I was walking around an office one day and just doing the normal physical security tour, as I do. And suddenly the printer next to me started whirring. So I thought, "Oh, I wonder what's coming out here." I looked, and as this thing was printing, I realised it was the entire company payroll that was being printed out. The printer was in the main office, where everybody could access it, sort of thing. And there was bank account details on there. There was
Oh
people's
God.
salaries on there, everything
I
like
bet they were
that.
queuing up every month to stand by the printer, weren't they? Tell me you don't want to see that.
It was just this one day. I happened to be standing there. I could see whether picked it up, said, "This is the payroll." Then everybody that was escorting me sort of shuffled and looked at their feet. I said, "Do you know who printed this?" And one of the senior managers there grabbed it and said, "I think that's come from the financial director." I said, "Okay." I said, "Clearly a mistake has been made. Can I talk to the financial director?" And they said, "Oh, he's working from home today."
Oh, what?
And I said, "Okay, is his PA here?" And they said, "Oh, yes." So we went to the PA. I said, "I noticed the financial director has printed off the whole of the payroll in the company, in the centre of the office. Has he contacted you to retrieve that, because it's strictly confidential information?" And she said, "No, I've not heard anything from him." So that earned them a major non-conformity, because it was a breach of data protection. So
Justified. I think so,
absolutely,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, that's the fun of it. So, but these things, they happen. You think, okay, that could be a genuine mistake. He probably just printed without thinking about.
But that's what systems approaches are for, is to capture genuine mistakes, learn from them, and put in place procedures to make sure you can't do it again.
Absolutely. Well, the addition to that is to then turn round and put your hand up and say, "Look, I've made a mistake. It should be coming out of the printer. Go and retrieve it now," sort of thing. And if you talk to a PA, the PA is going to be the most reliable person to do it, because they have to look after a lot of confidential information.
Indeed. It's quite commonplace, yeah, for them, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I know with that company, they introduced a situation where each laptop was actually connected to, I think, the Office printers, and therefore he wouldn't have been able to have changed it to a home printer, so they had to change their policy completely. But yeah, so we learn from these things.
Yeah, we do. We do indeed. Yeah. So anything else then? Any other snippets like that? Any other really dodgy access control and
I would say never say to an assessor, "This is our most secure room," because that is that's a kind of dangle a carrot. Come and try our room. It's the most secure room, sort of thing. That happened to me one day, and shown this room. Only 3 people have access to this room. Nobody else has access. And me being inquisitive, had my visitor's badge on, which it given me access to certain areas, common areas. I waved my badge in front of this access control, and it opened the door for me.
yeah,
So I said, "Am I one of those 3 people?"
that's not a good one, is it?
Well, that was simply down to access control being a little bit muddled. They had a couple of levels of access control. One where it was all areas, and the other one which was all areas visitors. And I said, That's a little bit dangerous." And he said, "Well, no. All areas visitors means you've got access to all the common areas." I said, "Yeah, but what's all areas then? Or that's only for specific people to have access to everything in the company." I said, "Well, would it not be better to say common areas visitors, so that sort of
Yeah.
error doesn't happen?" So always think about what you name things.
That is important. Yeah, the way you name something implies things to people, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So yeah, so that does tend to happen. I've had a visitor's badge given to me with a completely different face on it. Put my visitor's badge in. Oh, I had my photograph taken. Visitor's badge was printed off, and then the picture on the badge was somebody completely different.
So, what sort of access did you then get, or did somebody else end up in your place? Or
No, thankfully, that was just simply a case of I had an image of a woman on my badge as I walked around the company, sort of
did
thing.
she not look like you?
No, she didn't. No, she didn't have the beard.
She had long flowing locks. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, but they did fix that. But reception actually that can be a great area for things going wrong. And it's not always the receptionist or anything like that. So normally receptionists are pretty much on the ball getting security right. I do remember sitting in reception one day, and there were 2 of us. And this gentleman came down, who I'd never met before, came down and just said Steve. And it just so happened both of us were called Steve. And because the other gentleman got up quicker than I did, the gentleman that come down to collect us didn't actually check any further. Just, "Oh, come with me." Took him all the way out to their office. And he wasn't there to visit them. He was there to visit a completely different company.
Do you
But
remember the BBC incident
absolutely, it was that sort of thing.
with the guy? He was called. He's actually Guy. He was called Guy Gomer, who turned up at reception at BBC for a job interview, and they took him to the studio. I think it was in the 1 o'clock news, and they started interviewing him as an IT specialist regarding it was a court case involving Apple or something like that. The poor guy was flummoxed.
I remember seeing that actually live, but I think that's what happened to this guy because they got him upstairs and they started talking to him about ISO 27001, and the guy didn't have a clue, sort of thing. And probably was scratching his head, and then he suddenly said, "I think there's a mistake here." And then later they came back down, and this gentleman said to me, "Are you Steve Mason?" So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Ah, right, I found the right one this time." But you can imagine the sort of thing, and that goes on, and people thinking, cringing, "Where am I? What am I doing here?"
Yeah, it doesn't bear thinking about sometimes, does it?
Have you come across any health and safety issues in your time?
I've got loads of health and safety issues.
Oh,
It's where I stop, which is the is what I need to worry about. We were talking about. I touched on subcontractor control earlier. We were in a certification audit years ago. I was in construction at this point, And we were at this. It was a really nice place. It was a stables, a sort of racing company's stables at a racecourse. Fine design, lovely place. We were sitting in this office that was being built. It was part of the way through, but which had a view over a sort of courtyard area, and it was a 9,000, 14,000, and as it was back then, 18,000 a month, which preceded 45,000 a month. So quality, environment, health, and safety. And we were doing quite well. Things were going okay. And then, as we were talking, over my shoulder, two young lads came running through. Looked like apprentice age, might have just been daily hired hands on the place, and they were both carrying those 4 foot wide brooms.
Oh yes,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, they were both carrying one of those and battling each other as if they were on gladiators across the floor of this stable yard. And the woman who was auditing us was sitting there staring at it and going, "Who are they?" And we're like, "Oh, they're subcontractor personnel." So she's straight to the subcontractor control elements of the standard. Fortunately, she wasn't overly concerned. They weren't harming each other in any real sense.
No.
But it was just one of those moments where you can't write it,
No, that's right. I had a similar one actually like that, but probably more dangerous in that sense. And sometimes larking around might seem a bit of fun, but you've got to be very careful of the dangers. And this was in a big warehouse near Heathrow Airport. And I was talking to the guy that was running the warehouse, and he said, "Oh yes," he said, "all our forklift truck drivers are well trained, and they know how to drive their trucks sensibly." Well, as this was happening, he had his back to the window where the warehouse was. I could see over his shoulder this guy dancing around on this forklift truck, speeding and spinning and doing wheelies with it, whatever you name it. He was doing something with it, and as he was talking, I just said, "You mean a bit like that driver out there?" And he turns around.
Yeah.
and, and I'm sure it would have been a case of if the floor could swallow him up, but he didn't. He just turned to one of his supervisors, said, "I think you need to have a word with him." And they went out there,
Yeah,
but
probably.
it was always a case of, well, moving on. So don't do pirouettes on your forklift truck.
When I was in manufacturing, we had a major client, a household name, international brand, and we were manufacturing products for them, and we relied on a supply chain which created steel. So they wanted to verify our supply chain. So they wouldn't just audit us; they'd go on subcontractor, auditing. So we took them to a foundry where it wasn't the cleanest, nicest place to ever visit, and it just smacked of high risk. The entire place.
Right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
PPE was of huge importance. We're all togged up. We look like spacemen, walking around this site. And it's getting towards the end of the day, and the shift was ending at about 4 o'clock, and we're still walking around. And the shop floor supervisor manager is walking us around. And a guy comes out of one of the shop floor offices. He's literally wearing t-shirt, shorts, and flip flops, and carrying an Asda bag. And he trips across with his stuff in his Asda bag. I think it's his lunchbox or something in his newspaper. And he waves towards us, and the manager goes, "See you, Bob. See you in the morning," and walks out and heads across the shop floor. And we're all standing there just staring. So it's like, what are you doing? I know you're leaving, but you've got to get to the door safely. It's another
Yes.
100 meters.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think sometimes, we think about our rules and regulations whilst we work, but we don't always think about them after, do we? And really, your rules and regulations keep you going until you've left the organisation or the building.
They
But
do indeed.
yeah, no, there have been some other things. I was thinking of health and safety. One thing that's guaranteed to get you a non-conformity is fire doors. And it can be in any assessment, because I was in a 9,000 assessment where I found every single fire door had been blocked by pallets in a warehouse. So I said, sorry, that's a non-conformity. Another one where the fire door at the bottom of the stairs was actually chained and padlocked.
Seen that numerous times. Yeah. Oh, people keep using it as a standard exit. Well, sorry, you can't lock them in.
Yes, yeah, and the funniest one, well, I'd say funniest, it was just weirdest one was where the local council had actually put all their bin rubbish outside the fire door on the outside of the building, and so when we used the fire exit during a test that happened to be happening that day, we got to the bottom and couldn't actually get out because of all the rubbish that had been put up
Oh,
outside the fire door. So
right. Yeah.
there's a lesson to be learned there. That if you've got perhaps the dustman coming round, where are they putting that rubbish? And they shouldn't be putting it outside of fire exits.
Indeed, and there's also the adherence to signs for safety. I've seen it so many times that the fire door's blocked by parked vehicles, and there's clearly a massive sign saying "Fire door, do not park here." In fact, I live in an apartment block, and that only recently there was a van parked across one of our fire exits. Just a bit of awareness helps.
Yeah, and I would say to people if they're doing any of their fire evacuation tests from buildings, always make sure in those tests you actually use the fire exit routes. Don't get everybody to file out through the main door, because that may not be the route that you take during a fire test. Go out through the fire exit route, and that will tell you so many things as to whether that is a safe route or whether it's a clear route. And that's the only way we found out about the local council piling up rubbish outside.
Right, you've touched on one of my favourite topics there, actually, which is emergency plans. I'd mentioned earlier that I'd worked in the NHS, and
Yeah,
a hospital group I worked for. One of the hospitals in the group had suffered a major power cut over a weekend. And a review of the emergency plan the following week turned up the fact that the emergency plan for that hospital was 144 pages long, and the responsibilities of the senior director, on call for emergency, were hidden in Appendix F, pretty close to page 144. So a lesson in making sure that emergency plans are actually usable.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think sometimes people write very, very long business continuity plans, which actually, in the reality of things, are never ever be read. Never ever be
No,
read.
no, you can't practice that and see that it's of any use, can you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, having had a house fire some years ago, or about 30 years ago, I know what it's like. You suddenly come home, find your house on fire, and the last thing you're going to be reading is a manual. How do I evacuate my house? How do I call the fire brigade? Instinct kicks in. It's only after that you need a plan for recovery, and you can work that plan out as you go. But I know in businesses you would have to have some sort of prompt sheet. So building frameworks for business continuity is far better than building a massive long tome that nobody will ever read.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Flashcards and the like are certainly much more useful than long documents. Yeah, but people think that it's good to write lots of things down. That's only true in certain circumstances, isn't it?
yeah, and I think there does tend to be a mistake, certainly within sort of government type organisations, and that if you write it down, it will happen. But my take on that is that you know you've got road signs that say 30 miles an hour. Just because it says 30 miles an hour doesn't mean you're going to do it. You know,
Yeah.
and it's the same with anything else. If you've written something down, does not mean you're going to do it. So you've got to enable it somehow and make it a natural way of doing things.
And it goes back actually, in a certain sense. We were talking earlier about a management system which is written in a way which facilitates people doing it more easily.
Yes,
We
yeah, yeah,
an episode which was thrown up in a disastrous research for 14 and 18. Well, it was 14 and 45. No, it was 18,001. I apologise. Uh, um, we had worked for several months with a particular team in the organisation in a manufacturing plant. That team were responsible for enacting change on the shop floor. So change management's a very big part of all standards. Um, and they had trouble doing the risk assessment element to any of the changes. So we worked for a very long period of time on streamlining that, making it simple, getting rid of all the multiple signatures that went from one desk to another, which actually didn't add any value, and asking them what they really wanted. During the audit, the auditor asked them about this process, and we were thinking, this is going well because we've worked so hard to get this to work. However, there had been a bottleneck, and all these risk assessments were going nowhere, it seemed. So the person in charge in that team, or person in charge on that day during the audit, when asked what happened to all the risk assessments, he pointed at the health and safety manager and went, "He's got them." At which point he went, "No, I haven't." Which led to a very embarrassing impasse, at this point, because the health and safety manager and I had worked over a very long period to get this to be streamlined. That evening, his director contacted our administrator to ask her to hide all the documentation, at which point she declined, thankfully. And it was a very bad episode. During that, we had apprentices interviewed on the shop floor by the auditor, asking them how they'd been trained. They just arrived after a year in college. The supervisor of the apprentices was on holiday, so they just let them go on the shop floor, supervised by whoever was the fitter working on that part of the shop floor. The words "that's embarrassing" came up from the auditor. So it was a very tough time, and a lesson in admin here. I'm going to move on to managing audit now as a topic, because we certification companies are not famous for admin. I'll just put that one out there, right? And we struggled to book in our research with this famous certification company, and we ended up getting it pretty much right up to the wire in the last week that we had our cert expiring. And the only person that they could offer up to us at this point was their UK technical head of health and safety. Great bloke, knew his stuff so well, as you'd expect. Therefore, took us to pieces. He's the one who said, "I can see you have a nice management system, but no commitment by your managers to using it." So these episodes were played out in front of him.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
a word of
Yeah.
warning: if you're having a research, please don't wait till the last week of your expiry. Do it beforehand, because you might get things such as major non-conformities which need rectifying in that 3-month window.
Absolutely. And I would advise anybody that any organization, if your certification body comes to you and wants to move that last visit before your recertification, refuse point blank. Refuse point blank, because that is total irresponsibility of your certification body. They are required under 17021 to give you enough time to put right any major nonconformity. So it works both ways, not just you as an organization, you shouldn't be moving it, but your certification most definitely should not be moving it. And we've had too many cases of that recently, certainly from one organization. It won't affect your certificate. Well, it'll affect your certification more if you do move it, because you run the risk, like you've just said, coming to the last day and getting a major nonconformity and then losing your certification.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just refuse point blank. They can move somebody else that hasn't got a recert coming up. Let them go and do that. They must have somebody like that on the books, but don't let them move you with the recert. So that's a bit of a bugbear for me on that one. But coming back to, I think, audits and things like that, you mentioned earlier about, have people got the right sort of processes and tools in place to do the job they need to do. And I do remember going around one organisation, I went to interview a PA, and she was a PA for about 7 directors, sort of thing.
Oh, right.
So she was obviously I won't say under the cosh, but she was obviously very busy. But she was very organised, incredibly organised. So much so that she had loads of files over to one side with lots of names on it. And one of the names on the files was passwords. And that immediately rang alarm bells, sort of thing. And
Really?
yeah, and I left it for a minute. I thought, no, let's just interview the lady. I asked her a few bits and pieces about her job and how does she look after confidentiality and everything like that, you know. So, sort of, it looked as if I was coming to the end of the audit. I said, oh, just one more thing. A bit of a Columbo moment there. Just one more thing. Why have you got a folder over there that says passwords on it? And she said, oh, yeah, she said that, you know, quite proud. She said, that's where I keep all my passwords. So I said, oh, do you mind if I have a look? So she said, yeah. And so she opened it up. And of course, there were all the username and passwords of all the directors and all the accounts they had, you know, everything like that in there. So I said, are you aware of the company policy on keeping passwords secret? Things like She said, well, I can't possibly remember all these passwords. So I said, well, I'm going to have to raise a non-conformity on you because clearly you've not followed the policy. And then I looked at the technical team that were with me. I said, why have you not come to this lady to find out whether she needs a password vault? Oh, we've only put it out to certain people. I said, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, it's only gone to the technical team. They're the people that really need it. I said, I beg to differ. I think people like this lady, she's done the best she can with the tools that she hasn't got, and you've now earned yourself a non-conformity. Would it not have been better to have asked the question simply around the organisation, who has to look after more than 2 passwords? And those people then you can assess as to whether they need a password vault. And that lady got a password vault very, very quickly that day.
You don't say.
No,
Mm.
very, very quickly. So, yeah, that was quite an eye opener. So, and that's sometimes the thing they call the assessor's touch. You know, you just happen to see something, and you know, you just bring it up. I mean, other occasions I've picked up fire extinguishers at 10 years old.
Oh, Lord, fire extinguishers here.
After being told, oh, all our fire extinguishers are up to date, I walked into this server room and there was a black fire extinguisher. And this was 2007. And I said, are you sure that one's up to date? Because that looks to me to be very old. Oh, yes, that's up to date. Well, I picked it up. It would last been serviced in August 1997, which was
Right.
the year the coloured ones went out, you know. So,
Oh, right. Oh,
but
dear.
yeah, so it's a assessor's touch there a little bit.
Well, you just said something that piqued my interest. Giving people the tools, you know, the systems to do things. It doesn't always work. Some people are bloody mindedly wedded to the way they do things, and some people are
Yeah.
literally allergic to systems approaches. And there are some people, regardless of whether they work with a computer every single day of their working life, still hate computers for no other reason than they used to, and they still do. You know, and I was auditing, doing an internal audit on a quality engineer. And in the organisation, we relied on a whole series of complex standards. We weren't just dealing with ISO management system standards. We were looking at all sorts of materials, metal standards, all sorts, literally thousands of them. And we had an online subscription to multiple standards sources, which cost something like £73,000 per year to provide to the engineers, to the quality team, to the shop floor, whoever needed it. You know, we had a very complex arrangement for giving subscriptions out. So I sat with one of our quality engineers. He was responsible, you know, for accepting materials from our supply chain that had to demonstrate they'd been verified to these standards. Really very important, because these are high pressure systems working in complex environments ultimately, where if they fail, there is disaster.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm asking him how he verifies a particular product. So he's going through this. He says, right, I get all the documentation from this system. It's coming from the supplier. This was the date. Bloody. Right. So I see there's a set of standards there. Can you show me how it's been verified to that standard? Okay. He opens his drawer in which there are loads of printed documents, and he pulls out the standard. Right. The standard he pulls out was printed in 1993. Okay. We've coughed up 73 grand for an online standard system where he can go straight to it with his subscription and read what the verification method should be and the requirements, and he's got a paper version. This was 2017.
What?
The paper version was, 24 years old by this point? And I know for a fact, within 1 minute, I could show him that there had been at least 2 other versions in that period of time. And he said, well, I don't like computers. Oh, you're sitting on one all day.
Yeah.
It's just...
And I think you're saying wedded to processes. I think there's the opposite of that, where you come across some people that are very, very diligent in what they do, and they will not deviate from the process that's been shown to them, and that's fine. It's commendable because there may be processes you need that in. So I wouldn't knock that for 1 minute. But I do remember going to one organisation. It was a goods inwards process, and I remember the guy was very, very nervous. And I had been told before I went down
Yeah.
there that normally this guy goes off sick when the auditor's round. So I said, okay, that's fine. Thank you for warning me. I'll treat it accordingly. So I went down to see this guy. I said, look, I've come to audit you. I said, but I won't ask you any questions. I said, I'll just stand back over here. Can I just ask you to book that parcel in over there? Is that all right? And he said, oh yeah, I've got to do that one next. I said, well, that's fine. You do it. I'll stand back. I'll just watch. You do what you normally do, and I'll then make some notes, and I'll ask you a couple of questions after. I said, they won't be too difficult, the questions. I said, just carry on normally. So he merrily went about his task, doing it, and he was very, very methodical, very methodical. Couldn't fault that or anything like that. And he then photocopied this bit of paper, hole punched it, and put it into a file that was on a shelf of files sitting over in one corner. So I thought, okay, that's good. He's filed it away immediately. Admin's good. But when he came to the end of the process, I said, can I just ask one question? That document you put in the file over there, why do you do that? He said, oh, I've been told to do that. So I said, oh, right. I said, do you know who it's for? He said, no. He said, I've just been told to do it. I then looked at the quality manager. I said, well, you've obviously put the processes together here and discussed with different departments. Do you know what that document's for? He said, no, I was told that's what they did. So I then turned to the warehouse manager. I said, do you know what that document's for? He says, oh no, we've always been told to do it. So there was this document being photocopied and being put into a file that nobody knew what it was for, and nobody did anything with it. Nobody ever looked at this. And along this shelf must have been 30 files of printed notes that must have cost them a fortune in paper, in photocopying paper, and also in photocopying services. I said, do you not think you ought to rethink this process? And they did. Yeah.
I worked somewhere where there was a document numbering system, which was three letters, 3 digits, dash, 3 digits, dash, 3 digits. Nobody knew where it had ever come from. And I kept asking, why have we got this numbering system? Well, we just use it. It's a global system. So you look at the global documentation, none of it looked the same as ours. So eventually it's just like, I'm going to get rid of it, see what happens. I removed an entire archive system from one company's network folder. In the days when the amount of space you had on servers was quite limited, and things would start to run out, and you get warnings to say you can't do anything anymore.
Yeah.
So I just said, right, I'm going to move everything. I'm going to get rid of all of this. And if anybody wants it, I'll know where it is and I'll give it to you. In a space of a year, 2 people asked for a document, and nothing else was ever needed. You talked just then about the nervous auditee. I've turned so often where there's an ashen-faced person sitting there, going, oh, I've never been audited before. Well, there's nothing to it. Just tell me how you do your job. What do you mean? Isn't there something you want to see? Yeah, I just want you to tell me what comes across your desk each day. What's the input to you? What do you receive? And what do you give to other people? Is that it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just tell me how you do it. Oh, well, it's easy to do this. And then you become really comfortable and relaxed. And then you go, what works? They go, oh, this works. What's not good about it? Well, I have to get this countersigned, and nobody's ever told me why it needs countersigning, and it stops at that point. Okay.
That's a perfect question. Perfect question. Yeah. And those should be asked more and more by auditors, why do you do that? Or what part of your job causes you most grief, sort of thing. And that can actually reveal some weakness in processes.
And it's empowering for that person as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But I recall this is a second-hand tale. I was not involved, but when I did my NEBOSH training, the trainer had worked for health and safety executive. Um, and he was doing it was a site visit, just an inspection. Nothing had gone wrong. There were no concerns or anything like that. And he was on the shop floor interviewing a shop floor supervisor. And he asked him for something. He asked him. He said, "Can I see so and so?" Yeah, yeah. I'll go get it. The guy got up and walked out. This is in the morning, and he never came back. He went home and never came back because he was so scared of the process. That's what people feel like when they're questioned.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've spoken very much about sort of process sort of issues here and things like that, and I think they're all, in many cases, just sort of genuine mistakes. But I think a lot of this can be alleviated by doing some very simple checks. Don't assume something is right. Don't assume it's working. Just get people to do some daily checks. I've often encouraged organisations to do just simple, if not daily, weekly checks. Where they go around and check things like access cards. Have access cards been left live? If they have, okay, what access does that card give me? And there are all things like that that can be done just to take away some of these problems.
And that can be done on anything. That could be a safety check, checking. I mean, putting in place regimes, checking that emergency stop buttons work is an old thing that some companies still never got their heads around. Checking that any process works just by asking the next person in the line, did that arrive on time? Um, self-checking of things is a very easy way that when you come to an audit, you can go, look, I've documented this. Look, I've found that every week when I do this job, it works really well, and every week when I do this job, it doesn't work really well. So self-checking is a really valuable thing.
And the documentation doesn't need to be anything dramatic. I mean,
No.
I saw in Switzerland when I was there on an audit, they were doing a thing called Green Day. Now, it's got nothing to do with the pop group, apparently, but it's quite simply they'd got an Excel spreadsheet, split it up into a grid, identified all the activities they wanted to look at, identified all the rooms and departments, and then everywhere they found it was okay, they put a green spot. Everywhere they found it needed a bit of attention, they put yellow spots. But everywhere where it was completely absent or a non-conformity, they put a red spot. And and there was a very simple thing. Okay, if there's a red spot or a yellow spot, then on another page there was a record of what needed to be done. So that's where the record was. But the encouragement was to each department, you must achieve a green day. Okay, that's the only objective, green day. And lots of departments quite proudly displaying signs saying, we've had 85 green days, or we've had 160 green days. And that just led to this pride, not just in their health and safety, but in their security. And it was a very, very simple system, very simple system. And if people can pick that up, then and that didn't take too much to maintain at all. You know. But it leads me to, I think, probably some of our final things to think about. Certainly from my point of view, final things. You've probably got some others to add.
I've just got some quirky things left, I think.
Well, these are my quirky things. So there are things that you probably wouldn't even believe had happened, but they do happen. They do happen. So never assume something can't happen. The first one was where a a gentleman dressed as a policeman arrived in reception, said, "Oh, I've come to pick up the hire car that you've taken because it was involved in a crime." Well, it so happened they had got a hire car that day to go back, and so they handed the keys to the policeman. He went out to the nice shiny BMW and drove off with it. Um, it was only later that when the hire car company said, "Oh, we're just going around to collect our car," they said, "Oh, the police have already got it." That led to some very strange
I,
conversations.
I could see that coming. Sorry.
And all I'd say is that, if a receptionist is faced with anything like that, he or she should just turn around and say, "Can I see the paperwork?" It's a Section 29 the police should provide, but always double check. Don't assume because it's, dressed as a policeman, they're a policeman.
The more brazen you are when you're trying to steal something, the easier it becomes. I was in an organisation once, and in another building. It was a training centre. There was loads of computer equipment in one suite. A bunch of guys came in, 2 or 3 blokes came in. They literally just marched in and started lifting things out.
Yep,
People were
yep.
literally holding the doors open for them to take it out to the van because they were so obvious in doing it, it couldn't have been theft. And they took the entire lot. You know?
I've seen that before, where a van turned up at the back door on a Friday afternoon and knocked on the back door. Just said to the guys in the downstairs service area, "Well, we come to do the computer refresh." And of course, they walked through the whole building, taking out all the computers, everything you could think of, and also the printers and the photocopiers. Everything was stripped, and it wasn't until Monday morning we all came into work and found out everything had gone. And that the guys that were in there were helping them get the stuff down the stairs, and that. But yeah, it's the brazenness of this sort of thing. One company I used to work for before we ever came into the era of 27,000, a man walked in off the street and sat in the R&D office, where he was given cups of tea, biscuits, anything you can think of, made welcome. He was sitting at a desk, and somebody said, "Oh, you here to see so and so?" He said, "Oh, yeah, that's who I'm here to see." And they said, "Oh, he's in a meeting for about 45 minutes. Do you mind waiting?" He said, "No, no." He said, "That's fine. I've got plenty of time, plenty of time." He obviously waited the right point because he then turned around and said, "Oh, can you just let so and so know that I've got to go to another meeting. I'll be back later." Well, in that time, he'd actually loaded his bag with laptops and phones that had been sitting around on people's desks. And it was only when everybody came back from their meeting they started saying, "Where's my laptop? Where's my phone?"
But on the other side of things, there are people who are extremely above board. Um, and we are all aware of the requirement for auditors to be impartial. And we can't sway them one way or another. They shouldn't be led by us as auditees. I did have an auditor once who was so above board that when we offered him lunch, he went, "And now I've got to pack up in the car. I'll go sit in the car and have it." And he went and sat in the car for 45 minutes on his own, eating his pack up, drinking his flask, and then came back for fear that he might actually be swayed by us. But then there was another auditor who was celiac. When we said, "Oh, right, what do you want for lunch?" We're going to go get some sandwiches. He went, "Oh, well, do they have any?" He explained his situation. "Well, we're not sure the local. We're a bit out of nowhere, We're not sure that the local sandwich shops will have any gluten-free stuff. So don't worry, just get me a chicken, wholemeal chicken salad sandwich and something like that." And the poor guy ate it, we didn't want him to. He ate it, and then during the afternoon, just looked worse and worse and worse. He started to inflame.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to just be wary of is pen testing. And what I mean by that is physical pen testing. We all know about our systems pen testing, but physical pen testing, I've seen it happen twice, where an organisation's got an embarrassment over it. One was where an engineer, a bogus engineer, got into the comms room of this organisation. He was given access to the comms room because nobody asked him any questions, and he sat in there all day. So that's 7 hours he sat in this comms room, and he then left at the end of the day. Said thanks very much. I've done what I needed to do. Well, 7 days later, something went wrong with the comms, and the company called their local telecoms company and said, "Can we ask what your engineer was doing last week?" And they said, "What engineer? We didn't send anybody out to you recently." And it turns out that this guy was a penetration test for a company that was just about to sign a contract. And
Oh,
because they'd let down their guard on their physical security, they lost the contract. The
that's
company
a
lost the contract.
killer, isn't it?
And that's why it's so important to follow your procedures. Another one, we just going full circle from where we started. We started with directors not taking security serious, but this wasn't a case where the director was taking security very, very seriously. But the rest of the company were just sort of, "Oh, we don't need that, we're all right, no problem." Well, he set up a pen test with a company and got this guy to come into the office. The guy turned up on the first day. He was able to get him, with a bit of smart talk, he'd get himself into the office. He got himself a desk. He was able to get a laptop and a few other bits and pieces from IT. Nobody was checking him. He got an email account set up and all those bits and pieces. And then he set up a bogus project. And in that bogus project, he invited lots of people from the company to the project and invited them to
Right.
share information with him, sort of thing.
Oh,
And the more information he collected, he saved until the end of the week. He took it to the CEO and said, "This is how unsecure your organization is. This is how much information your employees have actually given away to me. And this is how much access I've got to your IT systems." And that was a company that had no security controls whatsoever, or if they had, they just ignored them. So just be on your guard. If you don't be afraid. If you don't know somebody, just say, "Oh, I don't believe we've been introduced," and just find out who they are and why they're there, sort of thing. And if you're suspicious, just go and make a few inquiries, but don't always assume that, "Oh, he must be okay because he's in the office."
yeah. Particularly given what you just talked about regards access control.
Absolutely, absolutely. I find most companies nowadays with access control have got some very tough processes in place, and those that take it seriously are not likely to get caught out. But just be on your guard. Be on your
Be
guard.
on your guard. Well,
Yeah,
that's probably a good place to end, Steve, isn't it? Be on your guard.
yeah, yeah.
If over the next couple of weeks you find a strange man in your living room with a big beard, dressed in red, and a bag, just say to him, "I don't
I'll
believe we've
use
been
that.
introduced."
That's right. Yeah. You'll end up on next year's naughty list.
Oh, and on that
Uh,
Christmassy note, that was completely unscripted. Um, we ought to end. Brilliant, Steve. Thank you for joining me again. It's always good. Thank you, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed some of that. I hope there's some lessons in that for one or two people. It's been a great year for everybody here at Blackmores. We've had a very successful time. Hope everybody else has had a good year as well, and that if we've been involved with you, that we've been able to contribute to that. All that remains is for me to, from everybody here at Blackmores UK Limited, is to say Merry Christmas to all of you, Steve.
yes, Merry Christmas to everyone, and look forward to meeting you in the new year.
Yes, indeed, and a happy New Year. Look forward to seeing you all then. Goodbye.
Bye.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.